Good afternoon. I just wanted to hop on here real quick and bring another piece of information to your plate and see what everybody had to say about it. Recently in the news, it was brought up about the Electoral College system and it being 2019. I thought that it might be a good time to get out ahead of this before the 2020 election, and kind of break down what what they're calling the National Popular Vote movement, and why they want to abolish the Electoral College. I'm right here online with a website. It is the National Conference of State Legislators, the ncsl.org location, to kind of brush up and figure out what is going on here, and why people feel the need to, for lack of a better word, fix something that's not broken. As everybody should know, the Electoral College is meant to represent underpopulated states. It's to ensure that the voice of the people in those states are heard. So they are granted so many electors based upon the average number of populace in their state. So the more people that come in, the more electors they would get. The people that leave, the less electors they would get. So it's kind of an average across the board, across the country. So each state will have the opportunity to be represented by their electors per populace. So based upon how many voters that they have registered, that's what the electors are supposed to do. As I'm reading up on this, apparently this movement gained a lot of ground in 2006. That would be right at the tail end of the Bush administration and right before the Obama administration. The reason that this was called into play was because the Electoral College vote went to President Bush and the popular vote went to his opponent, and apparently it made some people angry. So, of course, if it makes you angry, we have to change it, right? Right. So as you get onto the website here, it is ncsl.org. You can get on and kind of read about what is going on with the National Popular Vote movement. It's basically coming out and saying that when this kind of took place, people felt that they were not getting the proper people elected into office. So what they went ahead and did is they tried to pass some laws that would bind their electors into voting for the national populace vote. There's a problem with that because then you're not representing your state. So I think there's a lot of confusion going on about what the Electoral College is, and even just scrolling through the websites that I have scrolled through just briefly before making this video, there's a lot of misinformation out there that are kind of trying to twist what the Electoral College is and how it represents its people to a way that makes it more desirable for them to go out and try to adopt this national popular vote movement. A couple key things that I pulled out of this article is there's not been a single state that has been able to pass this type of legislation yet. So there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of states that say that they do want to abolish the Electoral College. They do want to give their electoral vote or whatever to the popular national vote. Let me go ahead and read to you the introduction to this article that I'm looking at here, and it says that the National Popular Vote movement emerged in the late 2006 and has slowly gained some steam since then. NBP seeks to ensure that the presidential candidate who wins the most popular votes nationwide is elected president. When a state passes legislation to join the National Vote Popular Vote Compact, it pledges that all of the state's electoral votes will be given to whichever presidential candidate wins the popular vote nationwide, rather than the candidate who won in just that state. So, like I just told you, instead of your vote counting in your state, and they take the popular vote of your state, which would accurately represent the people living in your state, things that are important to you, they would in turn take it on a whole. So they would wait for all the votes to come out, and then they would go ahead and justify that give or take sort of count, if you will, between the candidates, and instead of going ahead and saying, okay, well, just Georgia or just California or just Pennsylvania or just South Carolina, we're going to go ahead and take those people's votes into consideration and put them into a more powerful vote where it would accurately represent what our people want. They wouldn't do that. They would take it on a national level, and instead of giving you in your state the opportunity to vote, they would put it more on everybody else across the board. If you live in New York, if you live in California, if you live in a highly densely populated area, you're probably thinking, oh, well, so what? Who cares? The problem with that is that you're not accurately representing smaller states. So smaller states have less people in them. Less people would have the opportunity to vote for, say, the underdog. And with that being said, especially in blue states or red states, you have the popular vote potentially going against their direct wishes as a state. Accurately speaking, I don't think that that's a good idea, because then you have California would rule the whole west half of the United States, and then you would have New York that would rule the whole eastern side of the United States. And based upon the legislation that's passed in those states recently and throughout the past couple years, think really hard about what that would mean. Now, if you're living in one of those states and you're a conservative, you already know. You already know what the problem is, and you already know that that's not something that's beneficial to the rest of the country. So whenever you get down to taking away the Electoral College, what you're basically saying is rural America, Midwest America, the breadbasket of our country, they don't care. We're just going to go ahead and kind of put our legislators into place, and we don't care if it touches base with their beliefs or with what they want to see accomplished in the country. It's not a bad thing to be a Democrat. I just think that we focus on two different things. And obviously, we're a bipartisan system for a reason. There are people that are more thinking with their brains, and then there are people that think more with their hearts. And I like to say that Democrats think more with their hearts than they do with their brain. because they're more concerned with social issues. They want to make sure that the poor are fed and that everybody gets a living wage, because we all know that dictates differently for everybody depending on your spending habits. So what's livable for you may not be livable for me. It may actually be too little or too much. You see it everywhere that you go. So going back to the electoral college system, it really gives the states the chance to vote for a candidate that represents their ideas and their values. And I don't mind losing an election in an electoral college type setting, but what I really would mind is being pressured to live under leadership that was dictated by a majority rule. I watched a very interesting video a while back that had the different types of leadership. It explained oligarchy, it explained communism, it explained a democracy, and it explained a republic. And the biggest thing that really, really bothers me is everybody saying that, oh, we're a democracy, we're a democracy, we're a democracy. Think about that for 2 seconds. Think about what being a democracy is. A democracy is, in essence, a mob rule mentality. So as long as the majority of the people agree, you're going to impose majority rule onto the minority. That's a dangerous system. Let's be serious. Think about it on a smaller scale. You can all think back to when you were teenagers and your parents wouldn't let you do things. And what was the number one, thing out of their mouth? Well, it's my house, it's my rules. So technically speaking, you lived in a, sort of communist type atmosphere, and you have a lot of people who grow up like that, being rebellious and want to act out against that authoritarian figure. So if you put it into a society standards, go and look at the way your neighbor takes care of their dogs or their kids. If you don't agree with it, so all you would have to do is say, hey, I don't agree with the way you're raising your kids. Excuse me. And, take them to court. And, you all get together in your little town, say there's 100 people there, and 20 people agree with the way that these people are raising their kids, and 80 people do not agree with the way these people are raising their kids. Automatically, by democracy rules, they don't get their kids anymore. You don't have the luxury of raising them the way you want to raise them. Is that really how you want your country to be dictated? We were told that we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. With that being said, how do you pursue any type of life or liberty, for that matter, when you're constantly dictated by a majority rule mentality? So that would mean, you have laws passed based on a majority rule mentality, and those laws affect your everyday life. It's a dangerous way to live. I highly suggest you look into this movement called the National Popular Vote Movement. Read up on it. Don't take any type of information from a .com. Don't go to Wikipedia. I know that as of recently, people have been coming out and saying, oh yeah, Wikipedia's gotten so much better, but really and truly, at the end of the day, anybody can post anything onto Wikipedia. You can edit those postings. lots of people aren't out there editing things just for, you know, for the fun of it, but it could happen. And that's how a lot of misinformation gets spread. When you think about, there's just there's way too many things. There's way too many things that I don't want other people to mob rule. I don't want to be told what kind of toothpaste to buy. That would put a serious damper onto free market as well, because think if you had to, get a popular vote to start a business. What happens if you go to open up a flower shop, just something stupid, a flower shop, and all the people in your town are against the flowers. They don't want a flower shop there. So they take a vote and they say, nope, you can't open your flower shop there. That's the type of situation that you're going to get yourself into if you support a national popular vote. I don't think that's what we want as a country. Maybe I'm wrong. I definitely had a hard time distinguishing what the difference between a republic and a democracy was. But once you know the difference, you don't forget. And it's very, very easy to see how quickly things can go downhill if you live in a democracy. A very famous quote, was from Benjamin Franklin. The woman stopped him on the street, and right after they had started building our Constitution and those sorts of things, and asked him, what did you give us? I don't understand this government. You haven't lost that mentality, but she didn't get it, and he told her, or it's a republic, ma'am. If you can keep it. And those words are so true today. If you can keep it, if you can keep it, we aren't keeping it. Slowly and slowly and slowly, we're letting the government jump in and dictate what we want. And it could be legislation passed after a mass shooting. It could be the red flag laws that are going into effect over our guns. It could be our electoral college system. Those are our elected officials. We put them into office because we want them to protect our Constitution. If we give up the right to the electoral college and to have every voice heard equally, then you're really giving up this republic. That's what you're doing. You're saying it's too much responsibility. It's too much for me to handle. I can't sit down and look at my candidates and decide for myself. I'm going to give my rights, my liberties to somebody else and let them make that decision for me. I don't think that's what you want to do. I could be wrong. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. But I don't want to do that. So I don't think it's something that any American wants to do. But when you have so much pressure built up on you, and people say things like, well, shouldn't one vote equal one vote, and my vote should be equal to your vote? Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what this system does. So I don't understand what you're talking about, because my vote would not be equivalent to a New York vote. Here in little Savannah, Georgia, my vote would not be equivalent to somebody in the Big Apple if we went to a national popular vote, because there's a lot of people in New York that have voted for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I wouldn't have voted for her personally. Thank goodness I don't live in New York, and That doesn't really affect me. But say she was running for president and, everybody in New York likes her. Well, there's a higher populace there. So, of course, they would like the things that they did for, I'm not even exactly sure what she's doing per se, but if she passed any type of meaningful legislation or anything like that, she would then have this mass following, and whatever their population is, that's how many votes she would have. And my state has a lower population than yours. So depending upon the ratios down here, I'm screwed from Jump Street. Does do you understand? That's how quickly it can escalate, and how quickly then Kansas becomes irrelevant, Georgia becomes irrelevant, all the states that aren't quote unquote swing states become irrelevant, and you're telling everybody in those areas that if you don't just vote the way we want you to vote, then your vote's not going to count. So what difference does it make? And that's the mentality that we're seeing from our younger generation already. This is already happening. This is already how these people feel when it comes down to voting. So when you feel like your vote doesn't matter, and you feel like it's all just a system and it's all just a game, you become disenfranchised. When you become disenfranchised, you allow others to take control of your life. You live by their rules. It's the same thing as living in your parents' house. You go right back to being a teenager. My house, my rules. And I moved out of my parents' house for a reason. We didn't, see eye to eye. That wasn't something that I wanted to do, was live under their house and their rules. I wanted to live under my house and my rules. So when you're out here doing your research and you want to understand the Electoral College, why it exists, first off, I say go back and read the Constitution. Read it and understand that these electors are put into place based upon the population. So if anybody tells you that they're, not being represented properly in the Electoral College, they're not understanding the text of the Constitution. The Constitution was written by some pretty smart guys. Read it once, read it twice, read it again if you have to. Google search those words. There's a lot of, I go over it with my daughters as well, and as we're going through, they say little things like, oh, people don't talk like that anymore. Oh, they spelled that wrong. And I'm like, no, you don't seem to realize how much our dialect has changed since 1776. Think about that. It's really changed a lot, and the left is pressing every day to change our vocabulary and the meanings of words to kind of make people feel better. But Google search the words, find their meanings, understand what it's telling you, and become an educated voter on your candidates. At the end of the day, I mean, it's so important to get involved in local government, knowing what they're doing in your state, in your town, in your districts, and it's even more important, excuse me again, not to listen to the campaign jargon. If you want to know what your candidate is going to do in office, go look at their voting records. Go look at their voting records. That's going to give you an accurate depiction of what they're going to do in office. Learn about the Electoral College. Learn about your candidates. And if you have any questions or concerns, find somebody who knows the answer. Find somebody who can help you. There's plenty of people out here who are becoming more and more aware of what's going on in the country. They're becoming more and more aware of what has already happened and is too late to stop. We need to continue to keep this country at least somewhat relevant to what our founding fathers wanted it to be, or we will lose the country. We will lose the country, and we will be at the mercy of somebody else. Personally, I don't ever want to be at the mercy of somebody else. I told you on my last video, I don't like authority. I don't like listening to what other people want to do or want me to do. There's not too many people in the world I know that do want other people to tell them what to do. So the best way to avoid that is to vote with your head, not with your heart. Go back and look at your candidates and be as an educated voter as you can be. That's all I want to talk to you guys about today. State of the Union is on tonight. You don't have to watch Stacey Abrams afterwards if you don't want to, but tune into Donald Trump. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye.